So, then what is the most common mistake that you see among the law students that they will make that you
Um,
wish maybe future law students could avoid?
yeah, that's a difficult one. I think that there's sort of um, I would say not necessarily a mistake that law students generally make, but I think that one that I made myself, which I would hope other people might be able to learn from, and I do see this sometimes with other law students, is kind of getting very bogged down in details when it comes to like an essay. Um, so when you're answering like a law essay, it will generally be a pretty broad question. So it will be something like, should there be capital punishment in the UK, or to what extent should the law on privacy be enforced within the law, or something like that. And there's a temptation then to sort of go away and do your research. And part of your research might be to look at one particular case, or a number of cases. Uh, but then within those cases, you tend to get sort of like bogged down in details of that case. And so your essay will then often result in just sort of talking in particular detail about that case and not actually answering the overall question. So my mistake that I tended to make on these sorts of essays was I would get bogged down in details of a particular case or a particular argument, and then not really address the broader question that I have going on, which I think it's really important. So that's why I say when I'm sort of like, teaching students about writing essays or writing responses to problem questions, every single paragraph has to relate back to that sort of central question. And so going off on a tangent or getting bogged down in the details really doesn't work.
Yes. So then, what are your recommendations for things for like aspiring law students? Like for instance, books or like courses that you think they should check out. They should definitely check out if they are interested in law.
I mean, obviously, my YouTube channel and podcast, just because that's sort of like um, it's kind of like bite-sized chunks. So if you're kind of interested in a particular area, then the chances are that there's either a podcast episode about that area or there is a YouTube video about that area, and they're only sort of 10-20 minutes. So and they're aimed at sort of like a broad audience. So it's people who are maybe not even thinking about a career in law, but are just generally interested. So they tend not to be too overly complicated. But beyond shameless self-promotion, I would probably have to sort of say, keeping an eye on sort of like the news is like a really good way of just keeping on top of things. One of the things that I say in the first week to law students is that law is essentially very closely related to politics, and understanding that is going to be key, because if you understand that the law isn't some sort of like, golden shrine established on stone, completely unchangeable, then I think that you're going to start off on the wrong foot. Law is related to politics and it changes based on the political environment and the political climate. And therefore, trying to understand the politics around that is really important. And the best way to do that is to often sort of read newspapers or go on news websites and just, even if it's just watching a 20-second clip on the news or something about what the latest headlines are, it's going to give you a sort of better understanding of what that political environment is. And you can probably get a sense for like, okay, well, this is probably going to affect the law in some way. And you almost become a bit of like a fortune teller in that way, because you can see what the law is almost going to look like in a few years' time because of the sort of policies or the priorities of the government. So definitely getting involved with that. I can't think of other things, but reading fiction is quite fun as well, and definitely sort of like broadening your reading so that you're enjoying your reading as well. It doesn't have to be law related. So just reading novels and things like that. It's just another way of engaging with language that, isn't to be dismissed.
Great. I'm just gonna end with a question that I've always had in mind. Like, how can you, because you've been doing podcasts and updating on recent Supreme Court case, how are you able to, I guess, read in a speedily way whilst getting all the important information, like important notes of the Supreme Court opinions down? Like, or do you have any techniques for it in terms of
Yeah, I
speed
think
read?
that's sort of like it's something that you pick up just from reading a lot of cases, is that you sort of start to understand that judgments tend to be structured in certain ways. So they'll introduce it with often the facts of the case, and then they'll go through the legal arguments in turn. So they might say at the start of the case that there are 5 points of argument between the two sides, and you can almost then scan or even do like a control F on the PDF document and sort of like, first argument or something like that, and it will take you to them. And you can sort of then either scan that, through to sort of try and understand it. But often they will introduce by giving an overview of what the point of argument is. And then they get into the details a little bit, which you can sort of skim over. And then you can sort of like almost skip to the conclusion at the end a little bit. Which is a little bit of cheating, but you can sort of then, by sort of jumping around a little bit, you can kind of see if there's certain points which are especially interesting that you want to pick up on. That's kind of the way to do it. But you by reading more cases, and this is the other piece of advice to law students maybe who are more on a degree, is that reading cases is really useful and important. Just because you can only get a certain amount from things like podcasts or things like videos or summaries or things like that, if you're actually reading the cases themselves. And some of them, they're only 7 or 8 pages long, the actual judgments, so they're not like 50-page tomes or something like that. It's a useful skill to have because they're written in a certain way, and once you get used to reading them, it's quite easy to then look at other ones and sort of recognize the format.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Marcus, for telling us so much about your career and your advices for a law student. And I hope to see you next time if we have a conference or something. Thank you so
definitely.
much.
I look forward to it. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.